Imagine this. You are standing in a crowded room, surrounded by people who adore you. They laugh at your jokes, nod at your opinions, and lean in when you speak. You have mastered the art of influence, not through force, but through something far more insidious. You have learned to shape reality without anyone noticing. And yet, beneath the surface, a quiet horror lingers. Because the more skilled you become at bending the world to your will, the more you realize something unsettling. You are not in control. You are being controlled. The same tactics you use to manipulate others are the very ones that have shaped you, your desires, your fears, the way you see yourself. This is the paradox of power. Machiavelli, the infamous strategist of ruthless realism, once wrote, "Men are so simple and so much inclined to obey immediate needs that a deceiver will never lack victims for his deception." But here is the question that should haunt you. What if the greatest deceiver is the system itself? What if the rules of influence, the ones you think you've mastered, are actually the chains that keep you enslaved? The illusion of control. Think of the last time you convinced someone to do something. Maybe it was a subtle compliment to win favor, a well-timed silence to provoke guilt, or a calculated display of emotion to steer a decision. These are the tools of the modern manipulator, soft, invisible, devastatingly effective. But now, consider this. Who taught you these tactics? Was it really you who decided to use them? Or were you conditioned by a world that rewards deception, punishes vulnerability, and equates survival with dominance? Machiavelli's The Prince was never meant to be a manual for evil. It was a warning, a mirror held up to the brutal mechanics of power. And in that mirror, we see something terrifying. The manipulator is always, in some way, the manipulated. The psychological trap Carl Jung called it the shadow, the part of ourselves we refuse to acknowledge. The manipulator's greatest weakness is not morality, but blindness. The more adept you become at playing the game, the more you lose sight of the fact that you are also a piece on the board. Friedrich Nietzsche saw it too. Whoever fights monsters should see to it that he does not become a monster. But what happens when the monster is not a person, but a system? A set of unspoken rules that dictate how we gain power, keep it, and justify its use? You believe you are pulling the strings. But ask yourself, why do you need to manipulate in the first place? What are you truly afraid of losing? And most importantly, who programmed that fear into you? The great question. This is where Machiavelli's advice takes on a darker, more profound meaning. He wrote for rulers, yes, but his real lesson was about the nature of power itself. Not just how to wield it, but how it wields you. So here is the question that changes everything. What if the ultimate manipulation is believing you are the manipulator? What if the game was designed to make you think you winning, while quietly ensuring you never escape? The answer lies not in tactics, but in awareness. Not in control, but in seeing the strings. And that is where the real power begins. The invisible puppeteers. You walk through life believing you are free, that your choices are yours, your desires authentic, your ambitions self-created. But what if the very instincts driving you were implanted long before you realized you were being programmed? Machiavelli understood this better than most. His writings exposed a brutal truth. Power does not belong to those who are merely strong or intelligent, but to those who understand how human nature can be exploited. Yet here's the twist. Those who exploit are also being exploited. The modern manipulator is not some lone genius pulling strings from the shadows. He is a product of a system far older and more pervasive than he realizes. His tactics, flattery, deception, strategic cruelty are not inventions, but inherited scripts. He believes he is playing the game, but the game was written centuries before he was born. So who or what wrote the rules? The psychological roots of manipulation. To understand why manipulation is so effective, we must first understand why it is so natural. 1. The fear of powerlessness. Friedrich Nietzsche argued that the will to power is the fundamental human drive, not just over others, but over chaos itself. We manipulate because the alternative is unthinkable, admitting we have no control. But this creates a paradox. The more we seek control, the more we become enslaved by the need for it. Every calculated move, every strategic lie, tightens the chains of our own insecurity. 2. The illusion of reward. B. F. Skinner's experiments in behavioral psychology revealed something unsettling. Humans, like lab rats, will repeat actions that deliver intermittent rewards. Praise, money, social status, these are the pellets that keep us pressing the lever. The modern manipulator is no exception. He has learned that certain behaviors yield predictable results. But in doing so, he becomes just as conditioned as those he manipulates. 3. The shadow self. Carl Jung warned that the traits we despise in others are often the ones we refuse to acknowledge in ourselves. The manipulator sees deceit in his rivals, but calls his own lie strategy. He resents being used, but justifies using others as necessary. This is the great hypocrisy of power. Those who wield it most ruthlessly are often the most terrified of being powerless. The philosophical prison Arthur Schopenhauer once wrote, "A man can do what he wills, but he cannot will what he wills." In other words, you may choose how to act, but your deepest desires, those were shaped by forces beyond your control. This is the trap. Machiavelli's Prince was not just a guide for rulers. It was a revelation of how all human systems operate. Religion teaches obedience through guilt. Capitalism rewards exploitation under the guise of merit. Politics disguises coercion as consensus. The modern manipulator is not a rebel. He is a conformist, a product of these systems, using their rules to climb a ladder he did not build. Jean-Paul Sartre called this bad faith, the act of lying to oneself to avoid the terror of freedom. The manipulator tells himself he has to play dirty to survive. But in doing so, he surrenders his ability to choose not to. The unseen conditioning. Aldous Huxley's Brave New World envisioned a future where people love their oppression. They are not controlled through fear, but through pleasure, distraction, and the illusion of choice. Now ask yourself, how many of your desires were planted by advertisers, influencers, or social norms? How often do you mistake conditioned responses for free will? And most chillingly, how much of your strategic behavior is just you repeating a script written by someone else? The modern manipulator prides himself on seeing through others' illusions. But the greatest illusion is his belief that he is exempt from them. The tension builds. This is the hidden problem. Manipulation is not a tool of the powerful. It is the symptom of the powerless. Those who rely on it are not masters of the game. They are its most deluded players. But if manipulation is the disease, what is the cure? That revelation is coming. First, we must see the full scope of the damage, how this silent war shapes not just individuals, but society itself. The ripple effect of manipulation. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction, but in the realm of psychological manipulation, the consequences are rarely seen until it's too late. You believe your tactics give you control. But beneath the surface, something far more sinister is unfolding. Machiavelli warned that cruelty, when necessary, must be swift and decisive, because prolonged suffering breeds rebellion. Yet in the modern world, manipulation is rarely swift. It is slow, insidious, and worst of all, normalized. And so, we arrive at the great irony. The more skilled you become at manipulating others, the more you erode the very foundations of trust, loyalty, and genuine power. The personal toll. How manipulation corrupts the soul. Friedrich Nietzsche famously declared, "Whoever fights monsters should see to it that he does not become a monster." But what happens when the monster is not some external enemy, but the part of yourself that has learned to deceive as easily as breathing? The erosion of authenticity. Every time you twist the truth for gain, you sever a piece of your own integrity. Over time, you forget who you were before the mask. Carl Jung called this the shadow, the suppressed self that grows stronger in darkness. The paranoia of power. If you manipulate others, you assume everyone else is doing the same. Trust becomes impossible. Relationships turn into battlegrounds. This is the fate of Machiavelli's prince, eternally suspicious, eternally alone. The self-deception trap. You justify your actions as necessary, but each justification makes the next one easier. Soon, you no longer recognize the difference between strategy and cruelty. This is what Jean-Paul Sartre called bad faith, lying to yourself so convincingly that you forget it's a lie. The manipulator believes he is gaining power. In truth, he is losing himself. The societal collapse. How manipulation destroys civilization. Machiavelli wrote The Prince in a time of chaos, where deception was the only way to survive. But what happens when an entire society adopts his principles? The death of trust. When manipulation becomes the norm, no one believes anything at face value. Every statement is scrutinized for hidden motives. The result? A world where even truth is met with suspicion. The rise of the cynics. Arthur Schopenhauer argued that most human interactions are driven by disguised self-interest. When this becomes common knowledge, society fractures into warring factions. Cooperation collapses. Paranoia reigns. The illusion of control. Aldous Huxley's Brave New World warned of a society controlled not by force, but by pleasure and distraction. The modern manipulator thinks he is pulling the strings, but he is just another puppet in a larger game. This is the great tragedy. A society built on manipulation is a society doomed to self-destruct. The psychological recoil. When the manipulated strike back. History shows us that oppression breeds rebellion. But psychological manipulation is a subtler form of oppression, and the backlash is equally subtle, yet far more devastating. A silent resentment. The manipulated may not openly revolt, but they will sabotage in secret. Loyalty evaporates. Every ally becomes a potential betrayer. The collapse of influence. Machiavelli warned that fear is a stronger motivator than love, but only in the short term. Eventually, the oppressed will find a way to break free. The rise of the truly free. Viktor Frankl, survivor of the Holocaust, proved that even in the worst circumstances, humans can choose their response. Those who refuse to play the game of manipulation become the most dangerous of all because they cannot be controlled. The manipulator's greatest fear is not failure, it is irrelevance. The turning point. Now you see the full cost. Manipulation is not power, it is a slow-acting poison. But there is a way out. A way to wield influence without corruption, to lead without lying, to be powerful without becoming a monster. The answer lies not in abandoning strategy, but in transcending it. The moment of realization. There comes a point, if you're lucky, when the illusion shatters. You wake up one morning and see yourself clearly for the first time. A prisoner of your own manipulations. The power you thought you had was never real. The control you fought for was an addiction. The person you became was a stranger. Machiavelli would nod in grim recognition. This is the fate of every prince who mistakes cunning for wisdom. But here's what he never told you. There is a way out of the maze. The first law of true power. Self-awareness over strategy. Carl Jung spent his life studying the shadow, the dark, rejected parts of ourselves we refuse to acknowledge. His warning was clear. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Confront your own lies. Every manipulator has a catalog of justifications. I had no choice. They deserved it. This is just how the world works. Write them down. See them for what they are. Fear disguised as pragmatism. Trace the wound back to its source. Why did you start manipulating in the first place? Was it a childhood betrayal? A moment of powerlessness? Gabor Matte's work on addiction reveals a brutal truth. All compulsive behaviors stem from trauma. Manipulation is no different. The radical act of seeing yourself, this is where Nietzsche's "become who you are" takes on real meaning. Not the persona you've constructed, but the raw, unfiltered self beneath the tactics. This is the first rebellion. Stop lying to yourself. The second law, strength through vulnerability. Machiavelli taught that appearing weak is dangerous. But what if true weakness is the inability to be vulnerable? The paradox of honesty. Test it. In your next negotiation, try telling the blunt truth where you'd normally deceive. You'll discover something shocking. People respond to authenticity more than manipulation. The power of surrender. Jean-Paul Sartre argued that freedom is terrifying because it forces us to take responsibility. When you stop manipulating, you're left with only one option: to actually earn trust, respect, and loyalty. Building real alliances. The manipulator has pawns. The leader has allies. Read Julius Caesar's writings. His greatest strength wasn't his cunning, but his ability to inspire genuine devotion. This is the second rebellion. Replace control with trust. The third law, play the long game. Sun Tzu, Machiavelli, and Robert Greene all agreed on one principle. The highest form of strategy is making victory inevitable. Stop fighting battles. Every manipulation is a short-term win that weakens your long-term position. Like a chess player who sacrifices pawns, you eventually run out of pieces. Become the exception. In a world of liars, the honest man is the most dangerous. His words carry weight. His promises are iron. The 10-year rule. Ask yourself, will this tactic still serve me a decade from now? Most manipulations fail this test. This is the third rebellion. Think further ahead than your enemies. The final test. There will come a moment, perhaps today, perhaps years from now, when you're tempted to relapse. An opportunity appears where just a little deception could give you everything you want. This is your crucible. Will you choose the old path? Or will you stare into the abyss and realize the only real power is that which doesn't corrupt you to wield it? The illusion of control versus the reality of influence. You spent your life believing that power comes from control, that the ability to manipulate others is the ultimate leverage. But here is the truth you've been avoiding. The greatest manipulators in history didn't just control people, they changed how people wanted to think. Machiavelli's most misunderstood lesson was never about forcing obedience. It was about shaping perception so completely that people choose to follow. And this is where the final revelation strikes. You were never the puppet master. You were the puppet. Every lie you told, every string you pulled, every moment you spent calculating, it was all in service to an idea someone else planted in you. The belief that power requires manipulation, that influence demands deception, that survival means domination. But what if true power lies elsewhere? The antidote to manipulation. Sovereignty. Friedrich Nietzsche wrote, "The individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe." This is the essence of sovereignty. Not control over others, but full ownership of yourself. The unmanipulable mind. Viktor Frankl survived Auschwitz by realizing one truth. They could torture his body, but they could not control his mind. The moment you stop reacting predictably to flattery, to threats, to social pressure, you become immune to manipulation. The art of non-reaction. The Stoics knew this. Marcus Aurelius wrote his Meditations not to control Rome, but to ensure Rome could not control him. When you refuse to play emotional games, manipulators lose all power over you. The ultimate leverage. Machiavelli missed this, but Sun Tzu didn't. Supreme excellence is breaking the enemy's resistance without fighting. The truly powerful don't manipulate, they make manipulation irrelevant. The final choice? Architect or pawn? Every moment of your life, you are faced with a choice. Continue the cycle, use the same tactics that trapped you, and remain a slave to the game. Break the cycle. Become the rare person who operates beyond manipulation and in doing so, rewrite the rules. This is not about morality. It's about strategy. The most successful people in history, the ones who changed the world, weren't the best manipulators. They were the ones who transcended manipulation entirely. Steve Jobs didn't deceive people into buying iPhones. He made them want to. Martin Luther King didn't manipulate crowds. He inspired them. Marie Curie didn't scheme her way to Nobel Prizes. She earned them. Their power came not from control, but from authentic influence. The last question. So now, the final question remains. Who do you want to be? The manipulator, always one step ahead but never free? Or the sovereign, who needs no tricks because his truth is power enough? The choice is yours. But remember, every great journey begins when you stop playing someone else's game and start designing your own.